So today I would like to address the theme of emotion. Um, when we analyze the Anglo-Saxon culture today, we can easily see empirically that the common denominator of all communication is emotion. Um, there is kind of inexhaustible thirst for emotion in Anglo-Saxon culture and all the Western society today. And I would like to understand why, through your multidimensional approach, human today, or I mean the human in the modern society, in the Western society, is so fascinated by emotion. How can we explain the fact that the men of the 21 centuries cannot communicate without this dose, like a drug, of emotion? There is emotion everywhere, and when we analyze, for example, and we'll talk about this a few days ago, on social media, the contents with emotion spread like a virus. It's like, COVID-19. And in comparison, when we try to construct a content more scientific, more logical, more pragmatic, there are not many people who would like to comment the video, for example, or to share the video. Why is the human today it's so addicted to this very emotion that characterize so much the human in the Western society today?
Yeah, in the Western culture, actually,
Right.
and most cultures, and the reason is that the human being doesn't know any better. For him, to live emotion is to live. Is to he feels himself. He feels himself living when he has emotions, whether they're more positive or negative emotion. And the fascination for morbid films or is exactly that. Those films with all kinds of ghostly things and ghouly things and zombies and
yes.
things like that. So people like to have that adrenaline rush, But when the time comes when they live emotions, strong emotions, like somebody dies, their mother dies, whatever, they're subjugated by that emotion and they suffer a lot, up to the point of suicide or up to the point of depression or whatever. So the reason for that is that it's part of a consciousness, you see. Human beings can't make the difference between being vibrating, being subjected to a vibration, and emotions. And there is a big difference, okay? There's no emotions without reason. See?
Like justification.
Yeah, justifications. So every emotion you live has to have a justification. Otherwise, you can't live the emotion. Otherwise, you're crazy. People think you're crazy because they can't adhere to your justifications or your reasons. A person, if we say a person is crazy, it's because we can't adhere to his reasons. He has reasons, but it's not. The reasons are not compliant with ours. You see, for the compliant with the majority, and that's the problem. See, and the problem is reason. There's no emotion without reason. So the trap of emotion is through reason. It's like it looks contradictory, but it is like that. You can't react emotionally without having a reason to react emotionally, and the usual reason is the other. it's the what happens in your life, what's going on. You see? So something happens, it triggers something in you, and it creates a vibration in you, and you find reasons to react. And the reason usually it's in the événement, or the, I would say in English, the what's happening.
This event.
The event, yeah, exactly. So the event becomes the scapegoat for the emotion. See, somebody looks at you in a certain way, and you react emotionally. You have reasons to react emotionally by not liking that person because he looks at you a certain way. What you don't know is that the look triggered a program or something in you, and you have that reaction, the vibration in you. See, so you vibrate.
Oh yes.
So once you find the reasons, which is the look the person gives you, you know, plus backed by memories. Say the person can be can have a certain look or certain demeanor that makes you connect with certain memories. See, if your father had the same type of demeanor and reaction, same kind of look, and you reacted to that when you were young, then you're going to react to that person, but you're not conscious of that. See? So all you'll see is, all you'll feel is the vibration, okay? You'll vibrate, and you'll blame the look or the demeanor of the person, and then you'll react to that emotionally. See? So that's the basis of emotion. There's no emotions without reason, without justifications. See?
Okay.
We can't separate the two.
And
You see?
and it's like people will try to be triggered by one emotion. Maybe they are not in mind all this mechanism, but people will seek, will try to find a way to be triggered. And it's interesting effectively to understand this other connection and based on memory and justification. But today it's like the people want to be triggered, want to feel something. I want to feel something. They want to share the emotion with the people in the, for example, YouTube video. And this is very, very questioning, because this fascination, okay, we see right now the mechanism, but why is that trying always to seek this same emotion? Why they want to be triggered by it? It's like because this produce some dopamine, or there's something more in this. Why? Why they want so much to be triggered by it?
In other words, why do they want to feel that adrenaline in them? Why do they want to feel that feeling? It's because when they feel that, when they seek it, okay, that's not the same thing as being triggered. When they seek it, then they are looking for life. Life is that feeling of energy, see, creative energy. So for them, they can't be creative, okay, and they replace that. A person who is very by seeking to those thrills that trigger those programs, and they're survival programs, by the way. And a person who is creative, he doesn't seek those kind of things because he vibrates creatively. Okay, he has enough. It's because people are starving for that feeling of creativity. They're not in life; they're dead. in the sense that they function only through memory. See? They can't, they're subjected to programs, to automatisms. You see? Human beings are more automatons than they think. You see? They react and they think they have, they're conscious of everything, but most of their consciousness, most of what's happening is totally unconscious. You see? In the sense that they can't see it, they can't observe it. That's why they are confined to a psychological, what I call a psychological consciousness, or an involutive consciousness. They're not awakened to reality, to what's going on, to the mechanism of reality, of systemic reality, actually.
Okay, I see. And you made a point about the difference between vibration and emotion. Mm-hmm. Can you be more specific about it?
Well, when you vibrate, it's because there's been a program that's been triggered by something. Okay, so to vibrate is automatic. It's because you have a memory. There's a memory of something. So the memory, the repeated memory is what we call a program. You see? So once there's an event that triggers the program, it's automatic. It's like a fight for survival. Fear. Mm-hmm. You feel fear. You feel when you're in vibration, when there's a vibration in you, you actually it's fear. You feel fear. You're not necessarily aware it's fear, but you feel fear. So, and then the difference between that mechanism and the part that you reason, okay, to live the emotion, is very fast. It's almost instantaneous. But there's a difference between the two. So the difference between the two is that you're going to use reason or justify the energy or the tension you have, and then you're going to react to that. But when you react to that, you react emotionally. You see? If you didn't have that, if you didn't fall in the trap of reason, then you would only deal with energy, tension. You see? You would observe the mechanism, and you wouldn't, it wouldn't be imposed on you. Take the example of an animal, okay? An animal, he feels a vibration of danger, he reacts to it. He doesn't question it. He is totally subjected to his programs. So in a sense, he doesn't have any emotions. See? He just reacts instinctively, see? For survival. So man is the same thing, except he has developed a consciousness, okay, that makes him elaborate or think. Okay, so because of that, he interprets what's going on, okay, which is purely instinctive and survival, and he he falls into the trap of reason and justification and lives the emotion. You see? So the difference between the two is instinct or purely fundamental life, totally subjected to systemic reality, you see? And interpretation of, you see? So in the interpretation, there is consciousness, but there is a psychological consciousness which predates real consciousness or systemic consciousness. You can't develop systemic consciousness without developing psychological consciousness. In other words, one is a psychological way of observing life, reality, and the other is a systemic way of observing reality.
Okay, and the main difference is, or the main difference between these two observations.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us an example of basic and straight difference between a psychological observation and a multidimensional observation?
Okay.
Can you say
So let's say there's an event, okay, strong event, whatever, and it triggers certain programs, or one program, one conflict, and you have a big feeling of energy, okay? You're in vibration, you vibrate. When that happens to a person that can observe the system, okay, that can observe what I call by vibration, okay, he can control the energy. In other words, he doesn't fall in the trap of emotions. He knows the trap of emotions, and he has experienced it. So he can because he observes it, okay, just the fact of observation gives him the power to use the energy as he wills. Psychological observation doesn't give you that. You can't. It's because you can't observe like that you observe psychologically. Okay? So you're not there yet. So you observe what? You observe form, you observe the event, you observe reason, you observe, you can deduct things and everything. But you're being disinformed because you don't have the connection to systemic reality, which is mechanical, by vibration. See? It's purely vibrational mechanics. Just like quantum mechanics. The universe is mechanical. So the psyche of man is just as mechanical. The difference is that man has the consciousness to observe that mechanics. That's the difference between man and animal, and the animal. So contemporary man he has one foot in the animal kingdom, consciousness, and one foot in the psychological consciousness. He is in transition between his animal consciousness and systemic consciousness. Which, when he lives the experience, he lives the experience of awakening. We're not talking about mystic awakening. We're talking about real systemic awakening in the scientific way. In the sense that he will discover the mechanics of, just like scientific people, physicians will discover the mechanics of quantum mechanics. That's why they call it quantum mechanics. See? So they study the mechanics of what? Life at the micro level. See? So at the psychic level, it's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. It's purely information. See? So
yes.
once a person adjusts himself to that reality, that systemic mechanical reality, then he can start to control his life, because he starts to awaken. His person starts to awaken, and then it makes a big change in him. See? Then he has more identity, he has more authority, etc., etc. You see?
Yes, I see. When we integrate all of this, we have the feelings, the impression that to be able to have a multidimensional observation about ourselves, it's a matter of point of view. You have to be able to get an objective approach of yourself, because if you are subjective about your feeling, about your sensation, you are again in this trap. You have to be able to try to get access to this objective observation, and maybe in this case you will be able to understand the systematic observation, the systemic approach all of things. So it's like an exercise, because for example, for people, we were always in this psychologist approach of
reality,
their self, of reality, because this is the same things. There are some techniques, there are some practice to try to reach this systemic approach.
It's not a technique. It's a question of experience. You see? So at first you have to how to say that, to survey, to get rid of the psychological observation. In other words, to realize what it is. And to realize what it is. You see, you have to just like you stop smoking. You have to there's a period where you crave a cigarette. Just like the same thing, there's a big period where you crave, you have a tendency, people have a tendency to try to understand things through psychological observation, you see? And that leads to nowhere, actually. You can't solve a problem with what created it. You see, the consciousness that created it. See, so you can't liberate yourself with psychologically from a psychological consciousness. It's impossible. So you have to be outside that box. You see, but how do you get outside that box? It's another thing. So. You can only get outside that box through influence. You gotta be influenced. Otherwise, you're gonna disinform yourself continually. See, it's a trap, and it's supported by everybody, the consciousness of everybody. You see, involutive consciousness today is 100% almost of the whole planet. So you're influenced by that consciousness, whether you know it or not. You see? And you're influenced by it through your memories. You were influenced by it since you were born. You were born in a certain environment, and that environment was observed through a psychological consciousness. So you inherited that consciousness, whether you like it or not. See? And the thing is, you inherited that consciousness through fear. fear of abandonment, fear of being rejected by your environment, which at that time is your mother or your father, etc. You see? So the infant, he adopts the consciousness of his parents through fear. So it creates a bond between him and the collective, others, through fear. See? So his consciousness or psychological consciousness is perpetuated through fear. See? So you can say that what reincarnates, see, is that consciousness. It's not the ego that reincarnates, it's the consciousness that reincarnates. In the ego, in the new ego. See? In the new incarnation. When we talk about incarnation, we talk about the body, see? In matter. So what reincarnates is the consciousness of the parents, of the environment. And it perpetuates. The proof of that is DNA. You see? What continues? It continues to DNA. What is DNA? It's information. You see? So same thing. The influence of the environment is information. The parents have stored information since Adam, or before, even before. You see? It's all that information that influences the individual. So, when an infant is born, if he's born in a family that's totally unconscious, totally in a psychological consciousness, he has no recourses but to live that, because he's totally unconscious of that, and he's totally unconscious of the contract he signs, unconsciously of course, with his environment, through fear. So if I have a gun on your head, you're going to accept a lot of things you wouldn't accept if you didn't have the gun. So the gun is fear. Fear of what? Fear of not surviving. That's what the infant lives. That's why a baby cries. Not all the time, but you know, he cries because he wants to be fed. But to be fed, if he's not fed, he's not going to survive. See? So yeah, he cries because he fears not to survive. That's normal with feeding. But when if the parents are very strict with the infant and they don't take care appropriately of the infant, then he develops a conflict. He develops an abandonment conflict. You see, through fear, and that's his bond with the collective, with the others, through fear. See? So that's why today the consciousness on the planet is involutive.
It's very interesting because there's a kind of relation between fear and evolution, and you often talk in your videos about this primary fear of rejection and abandonment, which is directly linked to death in human mind.
The fear of death. The fear of actually, it's not the fear of death. It's the fear of not surviving. It's not the same thing.
Okay.
Fear of death is psychological. Fear of not surviving is not psychological. It's real. For the infant, it's real. See?
And from this same fear of not surviving, human beings build a false identity without realizing it, according to this same collective, this same group, in order to guarantee his surviving in this environment.
Survival. Yeah.
And so yes, and I was thinking about this, and I thought in this behavior there is a certain logic in it. A certain adaptive strategy that we find in all living organisms.
Yes.
And my question is, so how can we blame the involutive consciousness for allowing himself to sleep, in this false identity? Because this false identity, in some way, guarantees his survival in this environment, and this during centuries, millennia. And so why, from the multidimensional point of view, why the system does not build something to wake the human without a lot of suffering or extreme necessity?
Yeah. Well, that's the system. You see, the method of the system is suffering. It's through suffering that man can get liberate himself from that involutive consciousness. No other way. You see, so he has to go through that phase. We don't blame involutive. It's a state. It's a state of consciousness. It's a transitory consciousness. You see, between the animal and man, actually, the human being, the real human being. Actually, man today is not a real human being. He's not a complete human being. He has one foot in the animal and one foot as a human. You see? That's why he lives that condition. You see? He's in quarantine in that condition. You see? So he can't get out of there. You see? Because he disinforms himself, everything. He has the whole planet full of people who influences his way of thinking. So it's very hard for him as an individual to liberate himself from all that. So he has to go through, he has to understand or realize what's going on. And what's going on is that he is maintained in that consciousness through fear. Fear of not surviving. So the fear of not surviving, since he's very young, enslaves him to the judgment of others, and etc., etc., or the interdiction, what people say not to do, everything, the concepts, okay, of collective consciousness, or the collective, which will stop the individual by fear, which will connect him to that consciousness, and then he's trapped in that dilemma until he becomes conscious of the mechanics of it. Once he becomes conscious of the mechanics of what's going on, then we can say he becomes conscious of the systemic mechanics. Okay, so that in that sense he begins to awaken to reality. Once he awakens to that reality, once he awakens to the fact that all his life is based on, all he does is based on fear, then something lights up in his mind and he starts contesting that in a way, okay? Through observation. Only contesting that psychologically is not enough. He has to observe it every time he lives a certain experience, and when he observes that mechanic, then he liberates himself from fear. See? So all is left is tension, energy. Then he can use that energy. So he transmutes the fear. See? And the more he does that, the more he awakens. The more he becomes autonomous. The more he becomes centered. Because when he's linked to collective consciousness through fear, he's decentered. He's not centered. So his personality is habits he has through his connection through fear to the judgment of others and everything. So he's not centered. He doesn't do things for himself. He always does things because of others, because of the judgment of others, etc., etc., etc. So being conscious of that in real time, and that's very important, not before time, before the experience, but in real time, then something happens that transmute that energy of fear, being fear, okay, through just attention, energetic attention. And the more he does that, the more he has consciousness of the mechanics, and the more absolute his consciousness of the systemic mechanic is, the more he is in his identity, the more he has the will to liberate himself of that and everything. See?
Yes, I see.
So he becomes a new man. He becomes awakened to that reality.
But it takes a lot to be awake.
It's not
I
easy.
mean, some people, we don't even see the necessity of, awake, not base their life on collective, on the other group. They will say, yeah, but if I do this, I will be against the collective. I will be against my family. They will have the same fear.
Fear, yeah. It's fear that stops him from exploring or, experimenting, either with or whatever, of liberating himself, actually. So man doesn't try or tries very little to liberate himself because of fear. His fear stops him from liberating, stops him from observing other reality, actually. He can't fathom life being mechanical. You see?
Mm.
In science, it's obvious. But in his life, it's not obvious. Even for the scientist. See? In science, in his science specialty, it's obvious. Quantum mechanics, everything is mechanical, blah, blah, blah. Atoms, particles, and everything. Everything is mechanical. Quantum mechanics is a special kind of mechanics because it doesn't follow the same rules as classic mechanic. See? Macro mechanics, let's say. See? That's why it's mind-boggling. That's why it's mind-boggling to most physicians. Most people that study physics. See?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you can easily do some analogy between all this
of course.
science, quantum science, and of course human behavior. You say something very interesting about the system and about the way that the system used to awake people. It's suffering. There is no other way. It's only suffering.
Yeah, and becoming intelligent of that it's useless to suffer. The only purpose it brings is to liberate yourself. But the problem is how. So it only opens you up to opportunities of liberating yourself. And opportunities of liberating yourself comes through your contact with a person who is liberated from that. You see? But most people are confined, to suffer because they haven't had enough experience of suffering. See? Spiritual people, people who try to understand life through esoteric concepts and all that. Okay, there's a reality behind it. It's the same reality, but it's symbolized. It's interpreted, psychologically interpreted, and it does what it does. It's impractical. Whether when you observe systemic reality, mechanic, you can apply it. You see, very easy. Actually, it thrives on application. It only thrives on application. You have to apply it in your life to live the experience, and you see. So you got to be open to intervention. Because if a person hasn't suffered enough, he's not open to intervention. People look all over the place for intervention. See? They'll listen to one another.
Yes.
So, but the intervention they look for is more psychological. You see? When they hear somebody like me, let's say, and they haven't suffered enough, and they're more spiritual, no, it doesn't fit with them because not ready yet. They haven't suffered enough. When a person has enough experience, see, and generation before them has suffered enough too, not only in this life and the life of others too, you see, then the person can be more easily ready than another. See, he doesn't need to suffer as much. He is sensitive to suffering. The more sensitive he is to suffering, the more he will be open to new ideas. Because he won't have a choice. Because he's too sensitive to suffering. When people suffer a lot, it's because they lack sensitivity of suffering. You see? They're not sensitive enough. No way. So they need the experience, or the wall, to bang in the wall very strongly to open themselves. Okay, that's enough. They're ready for anything. When they're ready for anything, then they're ready. Otherwise, forget it. There's too much resistance. First of all, in the person and outside the person, the collective influence.
It's very interesting because this is the same mechanisms than with, when we talked about emotion. You are really to the point that you don't want no more emotion or overwhelming emotion. You get some overdose. And at this point, you can start to have an objective approach of it.
Yeah.
And so to try to reach a multidimensional approach of it. And I feel like this is the same for suffering. You have to reach a point that you have enough of suffering. You can take no more. And when you reach this very point, you are able to say, okay, I want to analyze this suffering, why I'm currently suffering, and in this dynamic, I will be able, in short term or long term, it depends of everybody, to decode, to analyze this kind of feeling, which is suffering, and be able to understand it, to be in an objective approach of it, and to be able to canalize it use
Yeah.
it
But
as a tool for you and not be
yeah. At first,
subject of it.
at first you're gonna analyze it to look at it in a psychological way. You're going to be in a position in a psychological way. But that's the precursor. That's the condition, okay, of experience. You're going to experience that. You can experience that by yourself, see, without interference. But this will enable you eventually to realize, you will realize that it's not enough. Opposing yourself is not enough. In other words, when you oppose yourself, you're still using psychology or psychological consciousness to liberate yourself from a psychological consciousness. So it doesn't work. Okay, it works up to a point. You can, contain much better. You learn how to contain emotion and all that, but you don't know the mechanics of it. And what's important is to know the mechanics of it. That's the difference between psychological observation and a multidimensional or vibrational observation. See, that's the difference between emotions, even if they're somewhat controlled, and perfect control of your life. Not emotion, your life, your energy.